Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravrajikacharya Astasata Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantikoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Kiri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaura Premananda Hari Hari Bolo. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. All glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Do we have... Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the 10th canto, chapter 22, which is Krishna steals the gopis' garments, and we're on text 19. Yuyam vivastra yad apo dritavrata vyagaha taitat tad u deva hilanam bhadvanjalim murji apanutaye ham hasaha kritva namo dovasanam pragrihyatam. So Yuyam vivastra yarapodrita vrata vyagaha taita tarudeva helanam badvanjalim udnyapanutayem hasa Kritva namodho vasanam pragrihyatam Yuyam vivastra yarapodrita vrata Vyagaha taita darudeva helanam Badhvanjalim udyapanutayem hasa Kritva namodho vasanam pragrihyatam Yuyam vivastra yarapodrita vrata Vyagaha taita darudeva helanam Vadvanjalim mudyapanutayem hasa Kritva namodho vasanam pragrihyatam Yuyam vivastra yarapodrita vrata Vyagaha taita tarudeva helanam Badvanjalim udyapanutayem hasa Kritva namodho vasanam pragrihyatam Yuyam vivastra yarapodrita vrata Vyagahataita tarudeva helanam. Badvanjalim urjavapanutayim hasa. Kritva namhodho vasanam kriyatam. Yuyam vivasta yatapodrita vrata. Vyagahataita turadeva helanam. Vadvanjalim urchapanutayim hasa. Hitva namodo vasanam prakrihitam. Yuyam vivasta yadapodrita vrata. Vyagahataita tarudeva helanam. Udanjalim urjapanutayim hasa. Kritva namodo vasanam prakriyatam. Yam vidaja yadapodrita vrata. Vyagahataita tarudeva helanam. Namodo vasanam prakriyatam. Okay, anybody else? Yuyam, you, vivastraha, naked, yat, because, apaha, in the water, dritavrataha, while executing a Vedic ritualistic vow. Vyagahata, bathed. Etatat, this. Indeed. Devahelanam, an offense against Varuna and the other gods. Bhadwa Anjalim, with palms joined together. Murdni, upon your heads. Apanutaye, for counteracting. Anghasaha, your sinful action. Gritva namaha, paying obeisances. Adhavasanam, your lower garments. Pragrihyatam, please take back. So translation, Lord Krishna said, you girls bathe naked while executing your vow, and that is certainly an offense against the demigods. To counteract your sin, you should offer obeisances while placing your joined palms above your heads. Then you should take back your lower garments. So you can repeat. Lord Krishna said, you girls bathe naked while executing your vow, and that is certainly offense against the demigods. To counteract your sin, you should offer obeisances while placing your joined palms above your heads. Then you should take back your lower garments. Okay. So purport by the disciples and servants of His great divine grace, Srila Prabhupada. Krishna wanted to see the full surrender of the gopis, and thus he ordered them to offer obeisances with their palms joined above their heads. In other words, the gopis could no longer cover their bodies. We should not foolishly think that Lord Krishna is an ordinary lusty boy, enjoying the naked beauty of the gopis. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, and he was acting to fulfill the loving desire of the young cowherd girls of Vrindavan. In this world, we would certainly become lusty in a situation like this. But to compare ourselves to God is a great offense. And because of this offense, we will not be able to understand Krishna's transcendental pastimes, for we will wrongly take him to be materially conditioned like ourselves. To lose transcendental sight of Krishna is certainly a great disaster for one trying to relish the bliss of the absolute truth. Yuyam vivastra yarapodrita vrata vyagahataita tarudeva evanam vadmanjalim ujanapa nutayem hasa kritva namodho vasanam priyatam. You girls bathe naked, Lord Krishna said, you girls bathe naked while executing your vow, and that is certainly an offense against the demigods. To counteract your sin, you should offer obeisances while placing your joined palms above your heads. Then you should take back your lower garments. So Omegyana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshurumiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vishnavadaya Vishnavadaya Bhutale Srimati. So I was thinking, I've actually been meditating on this pastime for a long time, because it's so obvious that how would you, not being a devotee, explain this to non-devotees and have them understand that? So it's always been in my mind, and really almost every aspect of Krishna consciousness that kind of seems controversial, I've kind of played in my mind over and over again. And it's so easy, because, and in fact I remember somewhere in the history, and I can't remember exactly if it was in a lecture that Prabhupada was talking about or just hearing about, I remember that there were these, quote-unquote, religionists that had gone to India, and when they heard about these pastimes, automatically assumed that this was just some lascivious, adulterous type of religion, some perverted religion. But what they couldn't understand is, what Krishna's motivation and what this pastime is really about. And so in thinking about it, I was thinking, because the gopis are absolutely pure, so is Krishna, and there's no lust in the material world. And it's so easy for us to project that lust onto these pastimes, and we have to be extremely careful about that, which is something that's mentioned in the purport. But what this is talking about, and what this is calling, it's almost calling us to as well, is about the fact that the gopis offered the ultimate example of surrender, because it was like it was like an all to please Krishna. It wasn't about, society or family or what anybody was thinking about. It was just their pure loving devotion for the Lord. And they wanted to, show him that they would do anything for his love. They were so willing to do anything. They didn't care about social norms. They didn't care about anything. And obviously this is pure there, but for us, we have to understand that. And that's the ultimate. If you think about it, and that's what the invitation is here, is for us to fully surrender. Krishna wanted to see the full surrender of the gopis, and he wants to see our full surrender. He wants us to, get to that place where we're completely vulnerable, where there's no false ego, there's nothing in the heart that's holding us back. There's no, hesitation, and just completely being in the most vulnerable place. And he constantly does that for the devotees. That's what the test is all the time, is to see, where we are, and to test how our willingness to be vulnerable and to do what it is, that Krishna wants us to do, no matter what that is. And that's actually real humility. There's a whole lot of strength in real humility, because if you think about it, if you were in the gopis' position, what kind of strength it takes to follow through with that kind of execution. And so obviously Krishna's not asking us to, stand naked, in front of him before the deities, but what he is he wants us to bear our heart fully. and he doesn't want anything to hinder us. And what he does want for us is full surrender. And so that's what this is like these pastimes are to invite and educate us in how to participate in Krishna consciousness and being the most chaste and the most learned. And it requires a lot of vulnerability, and that can be really scary to put ourselves in such a vulnerable position. But if we really focus on the faith and developing our spiritual strength, then we'll be able to do that. And developing our devotional strength comes from the processes of devotional service and chanting of the holy names, because that's the rope that we have to hold on to. And the more that we depend on that rope, and the more that we secure that rope around our waist, around our heart, our mind, our body, our words, through the chanting of the holy name and our dependence on Krishna, then we'll be completely safe. And no matter what situation we're in, no matter how vulnerable we feel, we'll be totally connected to Krishna. And so that's what that's all about. And then, too, in thinking about that, is how we share this Krishna consciousness with other people, because that requires a high level of vulnerability if you think about it. And that's what actually, exemplifies humility as well, is that, and Prabhupada said so many times, you will have so many people attack you, you'll have so many people go against you, threaten you or call you names, but real humility is doing it regardless. And the way you can do that is, that internal strength. And that, that internal strength is through the association of the devotees, through the association of pure devotees like Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, through the books, and through the chanting, and really taking the chanting. I remember there's another, and it kind of relates to this too, in regards to being careful about comparing ourselves to God and projecting our own mundane mentality, because if we do, then we will not be able to understand Krishna's transcendental pastimes, because we take him to be material. And so, I just lost my thought. Anyway, maybe it'll come back. Anyway, we have to be extremely careful about, not taking things in a mundane way and projecting ourselves. And again, and I'll probably go back through and see if I can retract my thoughts, is like through the dependence of the chanting of the holy names and knowing that Krishna has our back, then we'll be able to preach this Krishna consciousness to other people. And that's really again, like I said, it takes a high level of vulnerability to go out there, and that's how the meek inherit the earth, is like you're being really willing to do what it is that Krishna wants us to do. And then again, thinking about developing those spiritual qualities that will give us our strength and the shelter that we need by, and especially following the spiritual master's instructions. Because if we don't, this taking these mundane things, then we can develop this sahaja mentality, and that's something that we have to be extremely careful, because it's a very subtle thing. I mean, it's not that we're going around, and it's mentioned too that it happens that people will dress up as the gopis and have these personal, intimate pastimes, and that's not what it's about. We have to be super careful about this sahaja mentality, but it's also a very subtle thing, and I know I've personally experienced it myself, and I've seen other situations where we have a tendency sometimes to want to glorify ourselves for the advancement that we're making. And so, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but there are times when we want to share something, to show that we've actually made some spiritual advancement. And so that's something that you have to be really careful about. Also speculation and speculating about things, because we're in this process and we do get, because it's a revealed, this practice is about revelation in the heart. But it's also really incumbent upon us that if we do have revelations and we do have these thoughts, that we make sure that we're confirming them with the Shastras, with Guru, with the sadhus, with the saintly personalities, to make sure that what we're, making a decision about is really in line with that, because we can go off really fast. And it's a very subtle thing that we have to be really careful about in this way. So at the same time, one of the things that's really also important, kind of in contrast to that, is that we should reveal our minds. And one of the reasons that I find it valuable to reveal our realizations and the things that we gain from this process of Krishna consciousness is the fact that it validates that this is a real process and that it has real results, right? And so when you share those realizations, which are really gifts from Krishna, which I think I've also talked about before, is that when you share those, then that gives other people the opportunity to participate in those and take some value and get a contribution from that, those gifts, because we don't own those realizations. They don't belong to us. They were given to us by Krishna. And so, again, it's really important that we share these realizations, because, again, they validate the process actually really works. You just want to be really careful about making sure that you're doing something, to impress others as to your spiritual position. And I'm not saying we do that all the time, but sometimes, the mind wants validation for what it's doing. So it's just something to be really careful about. And then not comparing ourselves to Krishna, but always giving him the credit. That's how we know, too, that this process of bhakti yoga is actually valid and real. And the one way that you can tell that, like with a bona fide spiritual master and a bona fide guru, is because they always give the credit to their spiritual master. And they always give the credit to Krishna. They never take the credit themselves. And so that's something that, we should also strive to practice constantly. And it's something that I try to do too. Like if something goes right and something falls into place and I think of an idea that actually solves a problem, I try to go, oh, great, thank you, Krishna, that's a great idea. Because I want to try not to own that, because it's so easy, to get or have the desire for profit, adoration, and distinction, for the things that we do. But the reality is that the knowledge and, everything that we have, and especially as we're practicing this process of Krishna consciousness, comes from Krishna, right? He's the source of everything. And so, again, this whole process, it's just, for me, it's so amazing. The gopis' level of surrender is so tremendous. And then the other example that came to mind, which is something that I completely resonate with and I'm really attached to, is Draupadi and her circumstance. And if you think about it, it's, the whole situation exemplifies again this principle that the only shelter that we have in this material world is Krishna. That's it. There is no other shelter in this world. And, here you have this circumstance where the Pandavas, were put into this illusion of thinking that they couldn't protect their wife and they had to follow Dharma, they had to follow their older brother. And, you have Duryodhana and all these people thinking that they could take advantage of a woman and think that this was okay. But at the same time, it glorified the depth of Draupadi's faith in her friend, Krishna's friend, and, dependence and faith and shelter in Krishna. Because, as we all know, or many of you know, that, again, it's this place of full surrender where I can't protect my body. I can't even cover it, and this is, could potentially be like the most embarrassing thing. And yet she gave it all up and said, Krishna, I'm yours. You take care of me. What else have I got? There's nothing else that I can depend on but you, right? And that's the invitation that we're receiving in all these pastimes, is to understand and receive the invitation and the education of what it's like to fully surrender. And then all the intricate steps and paths and knowledge that, because the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam and all the scriptures are maps on how to become devotional servants, of how to become a devotee. And so, if we really take these in and we really absorb them, then we can really develop our own, Krishna consciousness and see it's so amazing and so much more easy to become attached to Krishna when we really dive into it and see, what can I take out of this? What do I need to learn? How can I grow? I mean, this is the most amazing self-help process there is in the world. There's so many self-help books out there, and there's so many, therapies and all these other things, and I'm not saying that some of those aren't valuable and that we can't utilize these, to help ourselves, but ultimately, this is the best self-help process there is. It's so amazing, the personal growth that you get out of it, and what to speak of, being able to get rid of all the anarthas and become pure at heart, so that you have no ulterior motive, so that you have, no conditioning, so that you love every living entity purely without any, covering for that or any hindrance of that. It's just beyond words of what it is. But that's, when we get to that place of full surrender, then Krishna reciprocates and loves us in a way that we actually really desire to be loved, and that's by giving him everything and loving him. And it's just this amazing reciprocation. So, the gopis are the most chaste. There's nothing unchaste about anything that they're doing, because they're revealing their heart to the ultimate and the highest level. And that's, again, what Krishna's, inviting us to do. And it just reminded me, too, also, in thinking about the gopis and thinking about Draupadi and the contributions that we have to make. And it speaks about this in some context, that somehow this came to mind in chapter 10 of 34, text 34 of chapter 10 in the Bhagavad Gita, which describes, I am the all-devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. Among women, I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfast, and patience. And so it goes into the purport, and Prabhupada shares that the 7 opulences listed, fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience, are considered feminine. And so these are the contributions that, feminine energy offers in this process and contribute. And everybody can contribute, but what's interesting is how Prabhupada puts it in the context of men as well, because the reality is as you practice Krishna consciousness, you're going above the bodily conception. And male bodies are wired with certain tendencies, and female bodies are wired by certain tendencies. So when you step into that female suit or that male suit, there's certain tendencies that are there that need to be taken. There's certain nature there that we should follow so that, it can interfere the least with us, getting to our goal. But he says, if a person possesses all of them or some of them, he becomes glorious. If a man is famous as a righteous man, that makes him glorious. Sanskrit is a perfect language and is therefore very glorious. If after studying one can remember a subject, he is gifted with a good memory or smriti. And the ability not only to read many books on different subject matters, but to understand them and apply them when necessary is intelligence, metha, another opulence. The ability to overcome unsteadiness is called firmness, and steadfastness, dhriti. And when one is fully qualified, yet is humble and gentle, and when one is able to keep his balance both in sorrow and in the ecstasy of joy, he has the opulence called patience. And I thought those were just wonderful, amazing descriptions of these qualities that we can develop, and there's so many qualities that are given in, the Bhagavad Gita. Like one of my other favorite verses is, humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, and old age and disease. Not only just the perception, but understanding that that's why you preach, is to understand that it's so evil that you don't want people to suffer from that. Detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So again, this is a map. This is instructions set out for helping us, to practice this process and become pure devotees, because ultimately that's, where we can have the highest level of reciprocation through the highest level of surrender. And so, again, I see this as, we have to be incredibly careful about taking things and projecting things, from our own mundane mentality, which is why we need to have checks and balances as we go through our devotional life. Really important to take instructions and feedback and chastisement, if necessary, from our spiritual master and from the senior devotees, so that we can make sure that we don't go off. And at the same time, it's this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful invitation, to ask us to come to this place, where we can have this full, loving, and reciprocative relationship with Krishna. And the thing is it's once you get to that place, it's not like that's the end of it, because Krishna's unlimited. And so is the loving, so are the loving exchanges that he has with his devotees. They're just unlimited. I mean, if you think about how many living entities there are, Krishna knows every single one of the living entities and their existence. And that's down to every single atom in our body, every single atom within, the ether, every single atom within the universe. He knows every single living entity. So if you think about the variety, because some people have very similar personalities, right? And they have a tendency to come together as friends because there's some connectivity there. But there's subtle differences between even people that have similarities. So considering, the vast amount of uniqueness and variegatedness, Krishna wants and has individual relationships, with every single one of them. All these varied nuances, all these, different relationships, with bhava and prema and all these other things that come into it. So we can look forward to having these just amazing, unlimited, continual growth of spiritual joy, through this process. I mean, it's just so amazing. But again, it requires a lot of patience, a lot of practice, and a lot of humility, the surrender of vulnerability, all these things. So I guess that's it. If anybody has any questions or thoughts or anything personal that they might want to add. No? I guess what comes to mind first thing is self-help to the degree where you no longer have to suffer through the process of the three material miseries, adiadmic, adidaivic, adibhotic, and also the fact that you get out of, the process of birth, death, old age, and disease, and are able to be like what I think about is like, all this chaos, all this, frenetic insanity that's around us, and being like a lotus flower, that has love and the ultimate love, so that all of that stuff kind of rolls out. Like there's that visual image for me where there's just like all this craziness going around, but there's this beautiful, open, lotus, peaceful, loving place that we can have in our hearts. And you're just not going to get that. You're not going to get out of birth, death, old and disease, old age and disease. You're not going to get out of mental anxiety completely and totally unless you're fully Krishna conscious. And that's what it has as far as self-help. And then self-help of coming to the place where we understand our real identity, our absolute and perfect identity of who we are. That cannot be offered by any process. And how beautiful is that, to know who you really are and not question yourself according to what somebody else may think of you, or what you may think of yourself because of your life experiences that you've been through. No, all of that gets shed, all of that gets moved, all those layers and layers and layers, get removed so that you're in this pure loving relationship and pure place with yourself too, because how could you not love yourself being part and parcel of Krishna? And that's hard to imagine with the false ego and, so many other things. But, we learn too to love ourselves through the process of having a spiritual master. And because ultimately that's what we have the spiritual master for, and we learn to love him, and we learn to love the devotees, but we learn to love the spiritual master so that we can learn how to love Krishna, right? And give our heart. And he's always training us up on how to cleanse our heart, but attach our heart to Krishna. So that's a long answer. I'm sorry. Right, yeah, unless you know your real self, how can you know how to help? Yeah, how to get help, how to help anybody else, right? Because that was something else Prabhupada was very specific about, was, you can't, save yourself. If you don't know how to swim, don't try to save somebody else. Try to save yourself first, or at least try to learn how to swim, and then save somebody else. And then the other thought that just popped into my mind, relative, I think it was what I was trying to say earlier, but I forgot, as far as sahajism and like taking things too simply, is one thing that Prabhupada said in one of his lectures is, don't try to advance spiritually, just serve your spiritual master, right? And that's again like a key point as far as the carefulness that we have to be careful about, is if you're so obsessed with all of that, it's going to take away. But if you just focus on serving the spiritual master, don't worry about whether you're going to advance or not, because if you're serving the spiritual master, you're following his instructions, you will advance. And when Krishna and the spiritual master understand that you're ready, everything's revealed with time. And that's what the realizations are. They're validations, again, in that long path. At least for me, it's going to be a long path.